How's it going out there? This is Feed Your Mind, and today we're going to discuss the secret history of church finally revealed. And so this all begins with the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church came into power after Jesus' execution. Jesus was part of a group called the Hebrews. So in the first century after the Romans executed Jesus, Christianity began to quickly spread because it was the talk of the town how Jesus, the guy that was healing everybody, actually rose from the grave. And so the Romans had to actually double down on trying to remove Christianity from becoming too powerful. And so they made Christianity illegal and began to execute everyone who was becoming a Christian. People were getting burned at the stake and thrown into the lion dens and also crucified and stuff like that. And so the disciples at this time were beginning their ministry, which doesn't necessarily mean they started churches. It's just that they were helping spread the good news, which is why they call it the gospel. And so as the disciples began spreading the message of what they witnessed with Jesus, and more people started becoming Christian, eventually the Roman Empire and the surrounding communities decided to execute the disciples. And so according to my research, they executed all of the disciples except for one who was able to get away, and that disciple was John. And John is credited with writing the final book of the New Testament, which is the book of Revelations. And so with all of the increased efforts by the Romans to stop the spread of this new religion that was Christianity, all of the increased enforcement instead began to convert more and more people to Christianity. And so they were getting the opposite effect. There was no stopping the good news and the spread of Christianity, which was not a good thing for the Romans who practiced paganism, including but not limited to sun worship. And so in my opinion, it appears to me that after the Romans took out all of the disciples, that's when they began to take over the religion. And so after the leaders of this new Christianity movement were removed, that left an opportunity for the Romans to, instead of continuing to increase persecution upon Christians, instead they would go the opposite route and become Christianity. And there's even a lot of information that will tell you that the first pope ever was one of Jesus' disciples, and they call him Saint Peter. But to me, it doesn't seem like the ideology around a pope is what Christ was teaching his disciples to become. And so I can't say that I'm in agreement that Peter the disciple was the first pope. And also, the Romans had actually executed Peter as well for his teachings about Christianity. So that's another factor we must consider. And so basically, as the Roman Empire began to fall, the Catholic Church began to rise. And so what was once the Roman Empire is now the Roman Catholic Church. Christianity ended up becoming the state religion for Rome. And no one in a million years would have thought that that would have been possible for the Romans to actually embrace Christianity just after a few hundred years of persecuting Christianity. And so with the previously aggressive persecution and then the turnaround, it appears to me that the motive for the Romans to embrace Christianity might not be just because Constantine saw a cross in the sky. The motive might have actually been because they couldn't control the message. It was all word of mouth. And so the only way for Rome to control Christianity at that time was to take it over. And so they became Christianity, and they put on the hats, and they brought in the other religions, and they merged the pagan ideas and practices into Christianity. So the proof that the practices of Roman Catholicism didn't settle good with a lot of people is eventually the Protestants formed, because they knew a lot of the teachings were not the teachings of the Bible and the teachings of what Jesus was teaching. There was a lot of pagan practices that were being introduced into the Christian religion, and so the Protestants eventually were able to break away. But really, if you look at the modern day Protestants, there's still some things that they continue to do that was introduced into Christianity through the Roman Catholic religion. For example, holidays like Easter, Christmas, Halloween, Valentine's Day, these all have their roots to pre-Christian Rome, where the Romans were practicing paganism. And once they took over Christianity, they introduced many of their old practices into the Hebrew religion. So really, there's even some research about the word church itself that suggests that maybe we shouldn't even be using that word. Because when you research the background of the word church and where it could possibly come from, according to my research, the word church is credited to the emperor of Rome at that time, who was Constantine. And so Constantine was ruling Rome around 310 AD. And Constantine is actually the one who is credited with converting Rome's state religion from pagan sun worship to Christianity. And so the word church pretty much is the accepted word for Christian gatherings, but it almost has now become the word for the actual building or the actual public place of worship. And so in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, Jesus says, "And upon this rock I will build my church." And so really around that time when that word was written, the word at that time was the ecclesia. And so you could see that same verse in Matthew as saying, "And upon this rock I will build my ecclesia." And so the ecclesia doesn't necessarily mean a building or a place of worship, but it could go deeper than that and mean the inheritance, the heirs of the kingdom. And so the believers in Christ would be the ecclesia. And so the word church is more a place or a building of worship where the ecclesia would be the people or the congregation instead of the actual building or the church. For example, Jesus' direct followers were called the disciples, and then the followers that the disciples brought into the establishment would become the ecclesia. And so when Constantine changed the word to church, the word church began to mean more of the building instead of the people. But really, if you're saying church as a congregation, then to become baptized and to become a believer means you are now part of the church or the congregation of Christ. And so that means there is only one church or one ecclesia, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you belong to a particular denomination of Christianity. And so what happened after that was the Roman Empire slowly began to crumble. And if you recall that in most of the Bible, the Creator has been said to put many kingdoms to an end. And then when you dig even deeper, it goes into much more detail about how many kingdoms will rise and fall before God puts a closure to all of the kingdoms that are ran by mankind and steps in and sets up the kingdom of God here on earth. And so as the Roman Catholic nation began to fall, the Roman Catholic Church began to rise. And throughout the Middle Ages, as the Roman Church began to gain power, there came to be a guy named Copernicus around 1500 who took up the teachings of Pythagoras. And he began to make an impact on the Roman leadership and was able to bring a new direction to the Roman church through science. And so Copernicus' theories were based off of the heliocentrism sun worship of Pythagoras. And isn't it a coincidence that the Romans actually practiced sun worship before they turned into a Catholic Christianity-based religion? And so at the time, the Roman Catholic establishment would punish anybody who would question the Bible. The Roman Catholics made it an illegal offense, punishable by execution, if you were to question if the earth was the center of all things. For Galileo and Copernicus to say that the earth was revolving around the sun was an illegal offense, and that's why they were scared to speak out, because the mainstream belief in not only Rome but most civilizations across the earth at that time all were saying that the earth was the center of the universe. So it appears Copernicus was part of the inner circle of the Roman Catholic Church, because according to my research, Copernicus didn't get punished for working on his heliocentric model with the knowledge he had obtained from Pythagoras' occultic work. And so Copernicus' works were published after he had passed in 1543 at age 70. And so after Copernicus passed, he had secretly made a deal with the inner circle of the Roman Catholic Church to publish his work. And so after his work came out, Galileo apparently started picking up on his work, and he started really taking over from where Copernicus left off in promoting the heliocentric model. And so Galileo got into big trouble by saying that the earth was revolving around the sun. He almost got executed for it, but he was allowed to go on to house arrest and live out the rest of his life in seclusion. And so Galileo passed away of natural causes in 1642. And then after that, between 1642 and the present time, is when the Catholic Church did a complete flip and they began to embrace the teachings of heliocentrism. And this wasn't simply just a sudden change in belief systems. This was more of an intentional thing, because through my studies, there was a hierarchy structure of the Catholic Church where smaller groups of circles within the Catholic Church were forming. And so a lot of my research led to a sect within the Catholic Church called the Jesuits, who actually were involved in this plan to convert to heliocentrism. And so this whole thing seems to be a bigger overall plan to take control of the Hebrews religion and convert it to Roman sun worship, where the sun is worshipped as the center of all things. And so the Roman Catholic Church began to embrace astronomy and the teachings of Galileo and Copernicus and Pythagoras, and heliocentrism began to be seen as science. And the occultic origins of Pythagoras' heliocentric sun worship religion was soon forgotten. And so heliocentrism began to be embraced in the Roman Catholic leadership. And eventually, over the next few hundred years, people began to slowly forget about the geocentric belief system. And so as the Roman Catholic Church began to lean towards science, it was no longer illegal to believe in heliocentrism. And so by making everything revolve around the giant sun in the center of the solar system, instead of everything revolving around the earth, this was pretty much sun worship version 2.0, which is what most people believe right on to this day, without really knowing the occultic origins of the belief system. This new heliocentrism becoming the mainstream belief system amongst civilization over the next few hundred years led to other theories being accepted as fact as well. And so people began to believe in outer space for the first time. And these theories were before anybody had even invented a rocket or anything that could verify this new belief system. Yet everyone began to believe it, and these outer space theories is what eventually led to many people believing that we are not alone in the universe, which gave rise to the theory of aliens. And that's really when what was once believed to be demons or spirits or possibly interdimensional beings, or who some might call the fallen ones, now all of these beings have now become aliens. And so heliocentrism began to lead to other belief systems like the Big Bang Theory and later the theory of evolution, where science really began to take hold of the minds of the public, and they began telling people that they really are nothing more than an animal-like creature that just happened to become conscious through a series of accidents. And so mankind and Earth became nothing more than just a big mistake accident. A lot of people don't realize that the Big Bang Theory was actually introduced by a Roman Catholic as well, after heliocentrism was established. And so the Roman Catholic Church went from punishing people like Galileo and Copernicus for being heretics and condemning their hypothesis as blasphemous. And later on, they began to accept the information, and they really ushered in a new culture of science. But it was really scientism, because a lot of changes that were made in the popular belief structure was actually based on theory and not fact. The only reason why these new belief systems were allowed into the public was because the ones in power were the ones who decided to allow the information to become administrated to the public as fact. And so now, as we journey into the present time, this belief structure has become a popular belief to the point where no one ever questions what Earth actually is anymore. The information is now taught to everyone in classrooms at a very young age, and theories are now accepted as fact, to the point where some Christians are aware of the theory of evolution and the Big Bang Theory and the theory of gravity being things that most Christians will reject. But when it comes to the heliocentric theory, the Christian community has actually not realized that it's all connected. This is all science that has an agenda, and the agenda removes what's in the Bible and what was thought of being a fact before, which was that there's a firmament above the earth. And so the firmament is in everyone's Bible. It's in Genesis, and we're going to talk about that more in another video. So make sure to subscribe and click your notification bell, and we're going to get into a deeper discussion about the firmament and why it was hidden and what it actually is. Also, check out my heliocentric deception playlist for much more information. I'll leave the link in the comment section and the description box. Simply enter your email address at feedyourmind1.com. That way I can send you some cool news briefs throughout the week. It's completely free. Help finance my next video by joining me on Patreon. You can sign up for as little as $1 and you get early releases and much more. Link is in the description box. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and click your notification bell. Include the title of your favorite video and you're automatically entered into a chance to win a free gift from my Feed Your Mind pop-up shop. This has been another episode of Feed Your Mind. Thank you for tuning in. Signing off.